Quarterback is undeniably one of the most important positions on the football field, and sometimes people who had great careers are overlooked in favor of the same 5 to 6 names we always hear in the GOAT conversation. So today, I wanted to break down who are, in my opinion, the 10 most underrated quarterbacks in NFL history. Press the like button and subscribe if you like videos like this. When people talk about modern quarterbacks, Matt Ryan rarely comes up in the same breath as Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, or Drew Brees. And yet, when you take a closer look at his career, Ryan's resume is quietly among the most impressive of the past 2 decades. Drafted 3rd overall by the Atlanta Falcons in 2008, Ryan immediately turned around a franchise that had just endured the fallout of the Michael Vick scandal and a 4-win season. Nicknamed Matty Ice for his calm under pressure, Ryan threw for over 3,400 yards and 16 touchdowns as a rookie, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year and setting the tone for more than a decade of consistent excellence. Ryan's peak came in 2016 when he won NFL MVP by leading the league in passer rating, yards per attempt, and throwing 38 touchdowns against only 7 interceptions. That season, he piloted Atlanta to Super Bowl 51, where the Falcons infamously held a 28-3 lead over the Patriots before suffering one of the most heartbreaking collapses in sports history. Unfortunately, that single game has defined Ryan's legacy more than the staggering body of work he compiled before and after. Statistically, Ryan stands among the best quarterbacks in NFL history. He ranks in the top 10 all-time in both passing yards, over 62,000, and touchdowns, over 380. He also led the Falcons to 6 playoff appearances, including 4 division titles, and remains the franchise leader in virtually every passing category. For years, Ryan kept Atlanta relevant even when the supporting cast or defense around him faltered. What makes Ryan underrated is how quickly fans dismiss him when discussing the best of his era. Because he never won a Super Bowl, and because of the painful memory of 28-3, Ryan gets written off as good, not great. But that's an unfair oversimplification. Few quarterbacks in NFL history combine durability, accuracy, and consistency the way Ryan did. He gave the Falcons stability for over a decade, and if not for one nightmare game, his career might be remembered in an entirely different light. Ryan wasn't just good, he was great, and his underrated status comes from being overshadowed by the most elite of the elite. Philip Rivers may not have the Super Bowl ring that cements a quarterback's legacy in most fans' eyes, but when you take an honest look at his career, it's hard not to be impressed. Drafted 4th overall in 2004 by the New York Giants and immediately traded to the San Diego Chargers for Eli Manning, Rivers spent 16 seasons with the Chargers before finishing with 1 year in Indianapolis. Along the way, he became one of the most productive quarterbacks the NFL has ever seen. Rivers threw for over 63,000 yards and 421 touchdowns, ranking in the top 5 all-time in both categories at the time of his retirement. He made 8 Pro Bowls and led the Chargers to 6 playoff appearances, including a trip to the AFC Championship game after the 2007 season. A run made more legendary by the fact that Rivers played through a torn ACL in the title game against the Patriots. That kind of toughness was a hallmark of his career. He never missed a start due to injury, stringing together 240 consecutive regular season starts, one of the longest streaks ever for a quarterback. What makes Rivers underrated is that he played his entire career in the shadow of his draft classmates, Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger, both of whom won multiple Super Bowls, and, of course, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, who defined the era. Rivers didn't have the postseason hardware, but he was consistently excellent in the regular season. He had 6 seasons with fiery and entertaining personalities in the league. Known for his animated trash talk, almost always G-rated since he refused to curse, and his unorthodox throwing motion, he was a competitor who made every game compelling. His leadership and durability stabilized the Chargers through coaching changes, relocations, and inconsistent rosters. Because he never hoisted the Lombardi Trophy, Rivers rarely gets included in discussions of the all-time greats. But when you line up his production, his consistency, and his impact on the game, he deserves far more respect than he typically gets. He may not be a GOAT candidate, but Philip Rivers was absolutely one of the best quarterbacks of his era, and one of the most underrated in NFL history. Donovan McNabb's career is one of the most puzzling cases of underappreciation in NFL history. Drafted second overall in 1999 by the Philadelphia Eagles, McNabb immediately faced hostility from some fans who wanted the team to pick running back Ricky Williams instead. He responded by becoming the most successful quarterback in franchise history, leading Philadelphia to 5 NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl appearance during his 11 seasons with the team. McNabb was the engine of Andy Reid's West Coast offense, using both his strong arm and his athleticism to keep defenses off balance. Long before dual-threat quarterbacks became the norm, McNabb was proving that you could be a legitimate passer and still burn teams with your legs. He rushed for over 3,400 yards and 29 touchdowns in his career, while also throwing for more than 37,000 yards and 234 touchdowns. He was selected to 6 Pro Bowls and finished his career with a 98-win, 62-loss, and 1 tie record as a starter, a win percentage that reflects just how consistently competitive his teams were. The high point of his career came in the 2004 season when McNabb threw for 31 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions, while leading the Eagles to a 13-3 record and an appearance in Super Bowl 39. Although they lost the close game to Tom Brady's Patriots, McNabb played admirably, throwing for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns, despite some late-game turnovers. That Super Bowl loss, unfortunately, came to define his career more than the years of success that surrounded it. What makes McNabb underrated is the way his legacy has been overshadowed. Critics focus on his inability to win the big one, but overlook the fact that he had relatively limited offensive weapons for most of his prime. Outside of Terrell Owens' one season in 2004, McNabb's top receivers were often journeymen like Todd Pinkston, James Thrash, and Freddie Mitchell. Yet he still consistently delivered playoff appearances. McNabb never got the recognition he deserved because he played in the same era as Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Brett Favre quarterbacks who defined greatness for that generation. But make no mistake, McNabb was a trailblazer for modern dual-threat quarterbacks and one of the most reliable winners of the 2000s. His absence from most all-time debates makes him one of the NFL's most underrated signal callers. Few quarterbacks in NFL history are as polarizing as Tony Romo. Signed by the Dallas Cowboys as an undrafted free agent in 2003, Romo went from obscurity to becoming the face of the league's most iconic franchise. Taking over as starter midway through the 2006 season, Romo injected life into a stagnant Cowboys offense and quickly became one of the most efficient and productive quarterbacks of his era. Over his 14-year career, Romo threw for 34,183 yards and 248 touchdowns with a passer rating of 97.1, which at the time of his retirement ranked among the top 5 in NFL history. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler and set numerous Cowboys franchise records, including most career touchdown passes and most passing yards in a single season. Known for his ability to extend plays with his mobility and creativity, Romo often turned broken plays into highlight reel moments. However, Romo's career is remembered as much for his struggles in big moments as it is for his successes. His infamous botched hold on a field goal attempt in the 2006 playoffs, several late-game interceptions, and a lack of postseason wins, just 2 playoff victories in his career, gave him a reputation as a quarterback who couldn't win the big one. This narrative overshadowed the fact that many of Dallas's playoff failures had more to do with shaky defenses or questionable coaching than Romo himself. What makes Romo underrated is how consistently great he was despite limited support. From 2006 to 2014, Romo carried Dallas offenses that often had porous defenses and weak offensive lines. He led the NFL in passer rating in 2014, throwing for 34 touchdowns with just 9 interceptions, and had 5 seasons with over 4,000 passing yards. When healthy, he was as dangerous as any quarterback in the league. Ironically, Romo's post-playing career as a broadcaster has made him even more popular, with fans praising his football IQ and ability to predict plays on live television. But as a player, he never got the respect he deserved. His lack of playoff success has kept him out of GOAT discussions. But if you look purely at efficiency, talent, and leadership, Romo ranks among the most skilled quarterbacks of his generation. Carson Palmer's career is one of untapped potential mixed with flashes of absolute brilliance, and that's exactly why he belongs on a list of the most underrated quarterbacks in NFL history. Drafted first overall in 2003 by the Cincinnati Bengals, Palmer was seen as the franchise savior for a team that had been mired in mediocrity for over a decade. After sitting his rookie year, he took over as starter in 2004 and immediately transformed the Bengals into contenders. By 2005, Palmer was playing at an MVP level. He led the NFL in touchdown passes, 32, and passer rating, 101.1, while guiding Cincinnati to an 11-5 record and their first division title in 15 years. Unfortunately, disaster struck in the Bengals' first playoff game that season when Palmer tore his ACL on the very first play from scrimmage after completing a 66-yard bomb to Chris Henry. That injury changed the trajectory of both Palmer's career and the Bengals franchise. Despite the setback, Palmer went on to have an impressive career. He threw for over 46,000 yards and 294 touchdowns, made 3 Pro Bowls, and had multiple seasons where he was among the NFL's best passers. After his time in Cincinnati soured, Palmer briefly played in Oakland before experiencing a late career renaissance with the Arizona Cardinals. In 2015, he had arguably his best season, throwing for 4,671 yards, 35 touchdowns, and a 104.6 passer rating, leading the Cardinals to a 13-3 record and a trip to the NFC Championship game. What makes Palmer underrated is that his prime years were often derailed by circumstances beyond his control. Injuries robbed him of critical momentum, and he spent much of his career on teams that weren't built to win consistently. While his draft classmates Ben Roethlisberger and Eli Manning went on to win multiple Super Bowls, Palmer's legacy became defined by what-ifs. But when Palmer was healthy and surrounded by talent, he was absolutely elite. His arm strength, accuracy, and ability to run vertical passing offenses made him one of the most dangerous quarterbacks of his era. The numbers back it up, yet his name rarely comes up in legacy conversations. Palmer might not have the rings, but he absolutely had the talent. Rich Gannon is one of those quarterbacks whose career proves that greatness doesn't always come early. Sometimes it takes time, perseverance, and the right system. Drafted in the 4th round of the 1987 NFL Draft by the New England Patriots, Gannon didn't even stick with the team that picked him. He bounced around early in his career with the Vikings, Washington, and Kansas City, spending much of his time as a backup or a stopgap starter. For more than a decade, he was seen as a solid but unspectacular quarterback. That perception completely changed when Gannon landed with the Oakland Raiders in 1999. Under head coach John Gruden, Gannon found the perfect system to maximize his quick decision-making and accuracy. Suddenly, the journeyman quarterback was a star. He made 4 straight Pro Bowls from 1999 to 2002, was named first-team All-Pro twice, and in 2002, he won the NFL MVP award at age 37. That season, Gannon threw for 4,689 yards and 26 touchdowns, leading the Raiders to an 11-5 record and a trip to Super Bowl 37. Although the Raiders were blown out in the Super Bowl by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, coached by none other than Gruden, who knew the Raiders' offense inside and out, Gannon's late career surge remains one of the most remarkable turnarounds in league history. Over a 4-year stretch in Oakland, he was among the best quarterbacks in football, outdueling younger stars and rewriting his own narrative. What makes Gannon underrated is how often he gets overlooked when people discuss the quarterbacks of his era. Because his career didn't take off until his mid-30s, his overall statistics, 28,743 passing yards and 180 touchdowns, don't match the gaudy totals of long-term starters. Yet when he was at his peak, few were better. He could read defenses quickly, spread the ball with precision, and lead an offense with efficiency. Gannon's story is a reminder that not every great quarterback dominates right away. He went from being considered a career backup to the best player in the NFL in 2002, a rare achievement in league history. For that reason, his name deserves far more recognition than it usually gets. Steve McNair, known as Air McNair, was one of the toughest and most versatile quarterbacks the NFL has ever seen. Drafted 3rd overall in 1995 by the Houston Oilers, McNair entered the league at a time when dual-threat quarterbacks were still viewed with skepticism, but he proved that you could blend athleticism with passing ability and still thrive as a franchise quarterback. McNair spent most of his career with the Oilers, who later became the Tennessee Titans. By 1999, he had led the Titans to their first Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. In Super Bowl 34, McNair came within 1 yard of tying the game against the St. Louis Rams, delivering one of the most memorable plays in Super Bowl history, a scramble and dart to Kevin Dyson that set up the heartbreaking final tackle at the goal line. That game cemented McNair's reputation as a warrior who could put a team on his back. Statistically, McNair threw for over 31,000 yards and 174 touchdowns, while also rushing for 3,590 yards and 37 touchdowns. He wasn't just the quarterback who could run, he was a passer with a cannon arm and remarkable accuracy downfield. His 2003 season was the pinnacle of his career when he shared the NFL MVP award with Peyton Manning after throwing for 24 touchdowns, rushing for another 4, and posting a career-best passer rating of 100.4. That year, the Titans finished 12-4, and McNair's performance placed him among the league's absolute elite. What made McNair so special and so underrated was his grit. He played through injuries that would have sidelined most quarterbacks. Broken ribs, torn muscles, ankle sprains, nothing seemed to stop him from taking the field. His toughness earned him respect from teammates and opponents alike, but because he never won a Super Bowl, he doesn't get mentioned alongside the all-time greats of his era. McNair's influence also stretches beyond stats. He was a trailblazer for modern dual-threat quarterbacks, paving the way for players like Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, and Lamar Jackson. His ability to adapt, survive, and succeed in a league that wasn't fully ready for his style of play makes his legacy even more significant. When fans think of great quarterbacks from the 1980s, names like Joe Montana, Dan Marino, and John Elway dominate the conversation. But quietly, Boomer Esiason had a career that deserves far more recognition than it usually gets. Drafted in the 2nd round of the 1984 NFL Draft by the Cincinnati Bengals, Esiason became the face of the franchise for over a decade and nearly brought home a Lombardi trophy. Boomer's best season came in 1988 when he won the NFL MVP award after throwing for 3,572 yards and 28 touchdowns while guiding the Bengals to a 12-4 record and an AFC championship. That season culminated in a trip to Super Bowl 23, where Cincinnati came within seconds of upsetting Joe Montana's San Francisco 49ers. With less than 3 minutes remaining, the Bengals held a 16-13 lead, but Montana orchestrated his legendary 92-yard game-winning drive to snatch victory. If not for that drive, Esiason might be remembered as a Super Bowl champion, and his legacy would look dramatically different. Over the course of his 14-year career, Esiason threw for over 37,000 yards and 247 touchdowns, made 4 Pro Bowls, and earned first-team All-Pro honors in his MVP season. He wasn't just a strong-arm passer. Boomer was one of the best at running the Bengals' play-action and vertical attack offense, punishing defenses that stacked the box against their running game. What makes Esiason underrated is how overshadowed he was by the star power of his contemporaries. Marino's Francisco's passing records, Elway's rocket arm, and Montana's championships often left little space in the conversation for someone like Boomer, who played in a smaller market and had fewer postseason appearances. Yet during his prime, he was every bit as dangerous. Esiason also displayed remarkable longevity. After leaving Cincinnati, he had productive stints with the New York Jets and Arizona Cardinals before returning to the Bengals in 1997 for one last impressive run at age 36, posting a 106.9 passer rating in his final season. Jim Plunkett's story is unlike almost any other in NFL history. A tale of perseverance, redemption, and ultimately, championship glory. Drafted first overall in 1971 by the New England Patriots, Plunkett was expected to become a superstar. He showed flashes early, winning the Rookie of the Year award, but his time in New England was plagued by injuries, poor supporting casts, and inconsistent play. After 5 rough seasons, he was traded to the San Francisco 49ers, where his struggles continued. By the late 1970s, it looked like Plunkett's career was finished. But then came the Oakland Raiders. Signed initially as a backup, Plunkett was thrust into the starting role in 1980 after an injury to Dan Pastorini. What followed was one of the most remarkable turnarounds in NFL history. Plunkett led the Raiders to a Super Bowl 15 victory, throwing for 3 touchdowns in a 27-10 win over the Philadelphia Eagles. His performance earned him Super Bowl MVP honors, and he became the first quarterback to lead a wildcard team to a championship. Just 3 years later, Plunkett did it again. In the 1983 season, he guided the Los Angeles Raiders to a dominant playoff run that culminated in a 38-9 rout of the Washington Redskins in Super Bowl 18. With 2 Super Bowl rings and a Super Bowl MVP, Plunkett cemented himself as a proven winner on the biggest stage. Despite these accomplishments, Plunkett is rarely mentioned in discussions of great quarterbacks. Statistically, his career numbers, 25,882 passing yards, 164 touchdowns, and 198 interceptions, don't jump off the page, in part because of the rough start to his career. But reducing Plunkett's legacy to numbers alone misses the point. He was a resilient leader who thrived when the stakes were highest. What makes Plunkett underrated is that he did what so many so-called GOATs are judged by. He won championships twice. Yet unlike Eli Manning, who is often praised for 2 Super Bowl wins, Plunkett's achievements are overlooked, perhaps because he was never a long-term star or statistical giant. But in terms of big game performance and overcoming adversity, few can match him. When football historians talk about the greatest quarterbacks of the 1970s and 1980s, the conversation usually centers on Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach, or Joe Montana. But quietly, Ken Anderson of the Cincinnati Bengals was every bit as good, and in many ways ahead of his time. Drafted in the 3rd round of the 1971 NFL Draft, Anderson became the Bengals starter by 1972 and went on to have a 16-year career defined by accuracy, innovation, and leadership. Anderson's defining season came in 1981 when he won the NFL MVP award and the Comeback Player of the Year award after throwing for 3,754 yards, 29 touchdowns, and leading the league with a 98.4 passer rating. That year, he guided the Bengals to a 12-4 record and their first ever Super Bowl appearance. Though they lost to Joe Montana's 49ers in Super Bowl 16, Anderson was brilliant in defeat, throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns against one of the toughest defenses of the era. Statistically, Anderson was a pioneer. He led the NFL in passer rating 4 times, completion percentage 3 times, and yards per attempt twice. His 70.6% completion rate in 1982 set a record that stood for 27 years, a testament to his precision passing in an era when defenses were allowed to be far more physical with receivers. Anderson's accuracy made him a natural fit for the West Coast offense, which Bill Walsh helped design while an assistant in Cincinnati before taking it to San Francisco. In many ways, Anderson was the first quarterback to successfully run that system in the NFL. Over his career, Anderson threw for 32,838 yards and 197 touchdowns. Numbers that may look modest today but were exceptional for his era. He was selected to 4 Pro Bowls, earned All-Pro honors, and remains the Bengals' all-time passing leader. What makes Anderson so criminally underrated is the lack of recognition for what he accomplished. He has yet to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame despite having an MVP, a Super Bowl appearance, and statistical dominance during his prime. Many quarterbacks with far less on their resumes have already been enshrined. And there you have it. 10 of the most underrated quarterbacks in NFL history. These are the guys who may not always come up in GOAT conversations, but their impact on the game is undeniable. From Ken Anderson pioneering the West Coast offense, to Jim Plunkett winning 2 Super Bowls, to Matt Ryan quietly putting up Hall of Fame numbers, each of these quarterbacks deserves far more respect than they usually get. But now I want to hear from you. Who do you think is the most underrated quarterback of all time? Did I leave someone off this list that should have made it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and I'd love to hear your takes. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to FootballLore for more deep dives into NFL history, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a countdown like this one.